I just wanted to record the webinar as well, so we can send that around at the end of the day. So for now, just a quick agenda from my point of view. So I'm going to be talking through the right data for the projects that you have. So we've got a cross section of people on the webinar today with environmental, ecology, hydrology, and going into other sectors as well. But I'm going to pull out the salient products today, not going into a deep dive at all. I want to focus on 4 or 5 key products and then show you how easy it is to order through the platform and start to show you and introduce you to the new basket process that we have to be able to check out and manage that data for you internally. So again, if you've got any questions, please come through the chat and I'll check at the end of the session. So bear with me 1 second. I'm just going to switch over to live presentation. So hopefully everybody can now see the Emapsite website. This is our homepage, which you're all used to. You will say you're either logged in or logged in as a guest. So to get straight into the platform, I can sign in. So I'm going to just do that for a second, just so that's ready to go. So before we go actually into the platform, I'm going to just talk through some of the key data sets we have. So within Emapsite homepage, you can go to mapping and data and just see a huge array of products we have. But if you click on view this section, it'll give a summary of everything that we have. So the key products, so the people that are on the call today, I want to kind of highlight briefly our mapping provision that we have, particularly focusing around MasterMap and the different outputs that we have for you. Focusing on our Groundshore partner, our Groundshore products that we sell through the platform and show you how to do that. And there's 2 or 3 different options to make you aware of. We also have access to the utility reports. So the big thing for the people that are on the call today will be mapping provision through then different reports under either underground assets or contaminated land, flood risk. But then equally, you can tap into those individual data sets and look at either the terrain data or the risks and perils data to look at the BGS data or flood risk on that particular site. And I'll briefly mention the kind of marine mapping we have. Some people on the call are doing onshore and offshore activities, so I'll just make you aware of that. If there are other data sets, I'll briefly mention a few of them, but I will go into more detail if you want to on an individual presentation. So, focusing briefly on our mapping, everybody's used to MasterMap and aware of what, aware that we actually offer MasterMap as an output. But since the summer of last year, we've made some additions. So we've combined our MasterMap offering with the terrain data. Terrain is by far our most popular LiDAR kind of product. So we wanted to combine those 2 to make it simpler for you and give you just kind of one file. So you can have in the individual files if you want to, depending on the project that you're working on, but be aware that you've got your straightforward MasterMap output and also now the addition of the terrain data. So at this point, if I had to go into the box standard MasterMap output, what we've created is sort of sample cards on our marketing pages. So before you want to buy anything, if you want to check any of our products, we'll have downloaded samples for you. So over the years, we've added the DWG and variation of those. We don't charge anything extra for things like building heights into that DWG output. And when you're on the map shop, which I'll show you later, there's no kind of additional viewing charges for you to see the MasterMap view before you buy. And I think that's a real benefit to Emapsite, being able to understand the site boundary, site location, and actually see before you actually buy that data. If there are additional downloads for some reason or slightly different variations of that download that you would like us to explore and work with you on, please get in touch. We've got some personalized outputs for different clients, so please engage with myself or my colleagues and we can look at that for you. So that's kind of MasterMap, and I'll go back into MasterMap in a second. The only other 2 additions around MasterMap is that over the years, particularly the last few years, that land registry data has become more and more available. So we've incorporated the polygons of MasterMap into the OS master map output. So the one on the left hand side gives you the kind of site boundaries and some additional information. Is it freehold, is it leasehold, and the title number. So going into like the environmental, even into architects, landscape architects, whatever the different discipline is, understanding the site boundary has been hugely popular. And once I kind of present this on different webinars through the year, the uptake on this product is significant. It's just basically a marginal price difference, if we're talking price for a second, to understand those additional attributes. The one on the right, just because we're here, we also have access to and able to provide the physical owner of that title, so the corporate ownership. If it's private, it's always through Land Registry as a private individual. But if Tesco's, Asda and Sainsbury's own 3 titles in front of you, we would be able to pull that data through. So you would need to request that through customer support, and then we can give you a CSV file of the output that goes with that site location for your master map, and then a CSV on top of that for the physical owners. Or independently, we do have different ways of packaging up the HMLR data. So for different projects, and I know some people on the call today have had different extracts of HMLR with us. So please reach out to us if there's anything Land Registry kind of site location ownership that you want us to explore and work with you on. But diving into the more critical kind of products for the people on the call today. Firstly, it's the Groundsure products. Groundsure, by far the leader in this market, and they've, if you haven't seen them before or haven't seen them for a while, 12 months ago they relaunched all their products. I always say a massive lick of paint, but it's so much more than that. And the interaction of those reports to enable you to get to the data you want in a nice clean interface is there from a PDF perspective. And then they've also given the ability of taking a number of those data sets into a GIS layer. So I will share a sample in a second, but just from this product card point of view, you can see the different options that we have. By far the most popular is the combined geological and environmental kind of reports. So this will give you all the contaminated land, flood risk on that site, BGS data, hydrology, all aspects of that. So you can just quickly see a brief summary of all the different data sets that they have in these reports. So I'll show you how easy it is to order those reports, but just briefly, if this all goes to plan, here's one I prepared earlier. So this is a sample that you can download. So you can, I'm not going to have and go through every element of this because I could spend a whole presentation on this, but I will show you at the end some of our previous recorded webinars. And one of them is alongside Groundsure for 25-30 minutes that go into the minute detail of the content of these reports and benefits of these reports. So it's a brief introduction today. So the couple of pointers I want to kind of mention on here is you've got your site location and site boundaries, but you can then navigate very cleanly and quickly through the report. Obviously 112 pages, you don't want to be scrolling all the way through. So if you want to get to your summary, you can do so and see what you need to deep dive and understand. So these are all hyperlinks to get to the relevant section. If you need to go back, you can go to the home page. And if you wanted to look at the master map that's incorporated already for you into these reports, you can see the boundaries that have already been highlighted and the detail of that site. So, and then if I wanted to go back to the top, back to the home page, I'm wanting to see the historical imagery and aerial imagery on that site, I can equally do that as well. So they go back through the site and as it's evolved over the time, so be aware that historical imagery and master map and the additional data sets that I might make reference to on an independent basis will be already incorporated in this report. I don't want to say any more on this report at this stage, and like I said, I'll make reference to the webinar at the very end. So just be aware. And like I said, there's sample records for each of the reports on these product pages. So if it's just the environmental side, you can equally download a sample record before you buy it in the platform. So I'm focusing on the key ones for a second. Master map, Groundshaw, then I'm going to just scroll down and make you aware, if you don't, around that utility asset, utility reports. So it's, for me, it's such a pain and burden, and I worked in the conveyancing space for a long period of time and different property companies, and understanding for a developer, investor, environmental consultant, what's going on underground has so many kind of risks, insurance, safety, and cost, and the time to actually collate that data is also cost and time consuming. So being able to come through Emapsite, working with our partner Technics to incorporate and understand what assets are going on underground, I think are kind of hugely beneficial, and they are more and more popular from, yes, the PDF report, but people are more and more taking those into digital outputs, into CAD outputs for you to interact with yourself. So how easy it is that site of interest. There's a number of different reports that you can look at, but I'm just going to go down to the bottom so it's a bit easier to talk it through. So ultimately, you've got time frame, 5 days, 10 days, with some exceptions in between, but 5 days for your essentials, 10 days for your premium. You supply the site area of interest, either through the platform, if it's a bigger site, which I'll talk about in a second, that we would get that quote for you based on that location. We then go out to all the local suppliers, all the different utility providers, water, gas, electricity, telcos, etc. Bring that back, aggregate that into a well-presented PDF report, and then send that on to you. So depending on the site, depending on what you're working on, what you need to know, you've got different levels of data. So if you know the area and you just want a high-level summary, it's the essentials report. If you're looking at more in-depth analysis on that site, I would go kind of premium. Then think about the site. Slightly different for some of the other sectors that we deal with. If you're perhaps in more the renewable space and they're looking at a massive site, they actually only might really be interested in the connectivity in the bottom left-hand corner of that site, so they can buy that PDF report of that location. You may be more interested actually on the whole physical site. So supply the site of interest. Let's get a quote for you and show you how easy it is to kind of have access to that information. At the top of this, and I'll go back through the other other webinars that we have, we do have half an hour, 25 minutes, fully detailed webinar on the creation of utilities, but also all the different suppliers that we have. There's around 130 different suppliers of data that we can aggregate and collect for you. So be aware that they are through the platform, and I'll go into a bit more detail in a second on those, on how to order those. So Master Map, Groundshaw, utilities being the key products for you, but then I'm just going to highlight elements that are available elsewhere in terms of risks and perils. So in here we've got what is within the Groundshaw report in terms of flood risk, the ambiental data. If you just want to see flood risk on a site for any reason and you don't need the full report, just be aware that you can buy elements of the attributes. By no always go for the full report, in my view, for the right projects. But if that's not relevant, please come through here and you can see our newest additions to our flood risk data, flood futures, groundwater, etc., through here, through a few different suppliers, JBA and Ambiental. No preference for me, but just to make reference to sample records on each of these. Flood Futures looks at 2020, 2050 and 2080. So if you are looking at a site and you need to look at that longevity of that location before housing on there or wind farms are on there, whatever it may be, you want to understand that flood potential risk in future years. So the modelling is there to support that, and I think more and more planning applications will have that kind of question to be asked: is this site sustainable in the future? And there's kind of more and more talk around that in the market. So be aware of that data and what is potentially at risk in the future. Flood futures, Ambiental has in there, and you may have also heard of things like JBA. Also, of course, the EA data. So 3 different kind of suppliers of that data. The only other one I want to mention is the selection of BGS data. I'm not going to go through these in minute detail, but again, just be aware that we do have those if you're looking at an individual site and you want to understand that property, sorry, that geographical location and the different outputs that you can take the data in. So come along, take a look at the samples before you sort of buy any of the data you need. I'm just going to check questions for 1 second. Okay, I'll cover that question in a second when I get to that piece. Thank you for sending that question. So, not to go through any more products in detail now, I'm going to go into the platform itself, but be aware all the products that I've mentioned have sample records and you want to download in the data, please do. There is just one more actually I wanted to double check on. So I've mentioned MasterMap and Terrain 5. You can buy Terrain 5 independently. So if you are looking at more 50k mapping, 25k mapping because it's a bigger location and you want Terrain 5, you can do that independently and you've got sample records again and you can see the detail that it comes back with. And then at the bottom, which I always forget, which I need to always make sure I make reference to, we've also got the national tree map. So if you are, and if trees will impact your assessment of that site, we've got the national tree map, which covers trees over 2 meters and the canopy cover that goes with that. Obviously then the tree roots that can impact your site, and if those trees were felled, the impact of flood all comes into play. So that is updated by basically a plane that goes over and captures that data. So you've got sample records in here if you need that, but housing associations, environmental consultants are starting to pick up on that data. So be aware that that's available through the platform as well. That was the last kind of product I wanted to kind of pull out independently. So if you don't have an account currently, you can register and come into the platform and register for free, and you can start looking around the platform. It's only actually when you physically buy something is when you're going to get charged for any of the data sets. And you can either have that on an account with us, or you can pay for that as a pay-as-you-go service on your credit card, so depending on your kind of payment preferences, and we can work with you on that. But once that's kind of set up, then you'll be able to order as you require. And most critically in here, there's 2 icons I want to go through, and there's kind of different user journeys, so hence why we split out these apps. One is our map shop, box standard, master map ordering, aerial imagery, national tree map, and some other things which I'll show you. From a ground shore and utility reports, they go through this app on the right hand side. I'm not going to dive in on the others, but just a quick highlight. Some customers just need a box standard PDF site plan. So understanding that site with a red outline boundary around it for property brochures, for planning applications, whatever it may be, for property valuation, or you don't have CAD or GIS in the business and you just want to understand that site, then you can obtain a PDF site plan in the scale that you require, traditionally 1 to 800, 1 to 850 or 1 to 1250, and different scales that go around that. So I'm not going to dive into the marine aspect of what we offer, but we have all the marine charts and marine data that's available for you offshore, particularly around the UK. But if you are going further afield, then we do have certain data that goes further out and further around the world on marine charts. And before I dive into the last 2, if you are doing and needing MasterMap and some other OS data sets, and you're doing it on behalf of a local authority or government body, for example, late last year I did a project with a client on the Ministry of Defence. Certain customers have that data licensed differently than private clients through the PSGA agreement. So you can obtain the data and get sign off from the local authority at a more manageable discounted price more of a handling fee than the actual master map pricing. So be aware that we've got contractual link and the main data entries of MapShop and reports. So very quickly, in terms of how to access this data. So just to get a quick location up on the site. So when you log in, you do your site search, you should get the master map view if you're zoomed in on a close enough scale. If I was to zoom out and I'm looking at a bigger site, it will naturally get to a point when it will change, like it has done on the screen for me here, to a more zoomed out kind of scale, going out to the 1 to 25, 1 to 50,000, depending on how zoomed out you are. But for where I am, let's go over here. So not to go through all the functionality today, but just to kind of highlight it. The default currently is a predefined square for you, but you can start deciding that site, especially in the environmental sector. If you're only interested in the field over here, you can draw your site, and I'm going to do this quick, so not an embarrassing drawing. Too quick. So if that's your site of interest, it will calculate the price based on that location. So just be aware of your shape that you've defined. Why I say that is if you're in the map shop, you're only going to get the data that's in your orange box. So anything outside of that, you're not going to get. So make sure you can define that. And I say that because reports is ever so slightly differently how it's presented. But from a mapping point of view, you'll see on the left-hand side the different data sets, the different price points, and it will just force you to go through that journey. So if I just need my box standard master map, it will default what you've last ordered. I've last ordered a DWG format, but we've got all the different shapefiles, CAD, GIS outputs that you require. So pick your required output, make sure it's clipped or unclipped, building heights or not, all the same prices, and then add that product to the basket. On the left-hand side, you can do a keyword search to get to the desired product if you wish. I just know my way around, so I just press back. You've got your environmental data, historical mapping, aerial imagery. I haven't really gone into aerial imagery, but we've got 3 different suppliers for aerial imagery: Blue Sky, Get Mapping, and Ordnance Survey. If you need aerial imagery on a site, it forces you to define your area, choose your product, and then rather than ordering straight away, if you click on the 12.5 centimeters, for example, it will tell you the date stamp of when that site was last updated, last time they flew over that location, and then before you add that to your basket. So you can see that it was taken a year and a bit ago, and then you can select that and add that to basket. That makes sense. So I'm conscious of our time, so I'm rushing through as quick as I can. I also made reference in the marketing slides the fact that we've got the MBNDL data and other flood data suppliers, so they're all available in the BGS data under the environmental data section. So just for speed, here's my site of interest. If I'm looking for a report on that, rather than me going back to the home page and going into the report section, I can just switch that shapefile into the report section. If you have already got a predefined shapefile, and rather than having to draw that out yourself, you can actually upload that. So I'm not going to do that today, but if you've got the individual files, you can drop those in, and then that will already build out that shape for you. So taking a load of hassle and pain away if you've already got that shape. So be aware that that function is also in there. So here's my site of interest, not the most exciting shape, sorry. And you can see now in my reports, if I just want to change it slightly, but by selecting the ground shore reports, rather than my what was orange but now blue outlined area, that's my main site of interest. But naturally, if there's a watercourse or a tank further away that could seep into the ground and seep into your development, it's going to have an impact. So the reports have cleverly done that, they're looking further afield and giving you a radius around that site. So any impact that's further away will also be incorporated into that PDF report that we have. So coming through Emapsite, there's no premium to access these ground shore reports and the utility reports. So it's giving you that cliche, I know, but that kind of one-stop shop of the data. So you can kind of get your master map, get your aerial imagery, and also your ground shore reporting and utilities all in one place. Then one central invoice managed nicely for your finance team. So depending on the site, the actual report, if I just make that a weird shape, but a bit smaller, the reports start from £160 for the combined report, but depending on if you want the more individual elements, so you can see 125 and 85, or you can combine that for the 160. So be aware that that's there. And then finally, within the reports, the ability to access the utility reports. Up to 25 hectares, you can order through the platform. Anything bigger than that, we need to get you a independent quote for you, and then we can price that up very quickly and come back to you on either the PDF report and the digitization element to that. If it is too big, just to go to the extreme for any products that we're talking about, I'm just going to just overinflate this to get to the point. In the map shop or anywhere else, it will say get quote. If you click on get quote and fill in the details, that comes through to our customer support team, and then we can support you on that quote of interest. If you want to save that shape to refer to later or discuss internally or request a quote, you can also, on this drop down menu with the question mark, save that shape, and that will give you a unique ID, as it says in the URL at the top, saving that shape, and then you can refer to that later as well. So the final stage for the last 2 or 3 minutes is I've ordered my data. Now, to make sure I've kind of ordered it and managed that data, I can take that data into the basket. And as you can see, I've already got a few things in my basket. So I want to check out those reports. So for the people that are used to using Emapsite, you can see that there's a slightly different and much improved kind of workflow that's coming through. But I can see the master map that I want to order. I wanted to order a site with the land registry polygons. Here's my ground shore report that I've ordered and another random piece of master map. So if I don't need any of those, I can amend those and change those. And then it's a step-by-step process of accepting the licensing, making sure you've agreed to the terms of those licensing. I can either declare that I'm the end user, or if I would like to add a subcontractor. So if you're working on a project and there's a subcontractor that also needs access to the data, rather than you having to download the data, then trying to email it, and it's hundreds of megabytes, etc., you can also have a subcontractor added, and then they can download the data from their account within Emapsite. So it's just, I've got so many projects through Emapsite that are running at any one point. It's just so much easier for the subcontractor to access the data. So if I click on that button, it will start giving you the details of who they are, and then you can add that subcontractor. No additional charge, it's just incorporated into the workflow of Emapsite and getting the best out of the service. So before I end up buying some data, which might not go down so well, as a recap, I have gone through the marketing pages, really focusing on mapping as an output. I know I focused on master map, but we've got all the different scale mapping that you require, 25K and 50K being the other two key ones. The ground shore reporting, sample records also included on the site if you want to access any of those, but the ground shore for that combined, easy access, one-stop shop report. We've got the utility reports. most people buy the utilities and kind of Groundshaw combined. Then if the project's not relevant for that, you've got the individual data sets, be it flood risk, national tree map, master map, aerial imagery, and I know a lot of those are incorporated in reports, so depending on what the project is in particular. And then making sure that you come through all the way through to either the Map Shop app or the reporting app to access the data, drop it into your basket and come through to the billing pages. What you then can do, just finally, while I'm here, is you've got your accounts pages, so either individually or company, so you can see all the previous orders you've got, anything you've got, what's under license currently, and go through and check that data for the projects that you're working on. So I want to just see if I've covered all my questions. Thank you for the people that have submitted all the questions. So a couple of things around account. I think I've covered some of these, but you can either go on account or, yes, pay on credit card. There is no minimum spend. Some people just buy a PDF plan and once and never come back to us. So, and some people can buy kind of £3 or £4 worth of data. So you can buy what you need when you need it. So fully flexible on that. Somebody's asked, I think I covered it, but just to check, the Groundshaw reports, there's no premium for buying through our platform. So you can obtain them centrally through here, whichever is kind of easiest for you. Oh, and then also, okay, so last question, and I'll just kind of cover it. When you go through the booking process, you can start adding things like project names, purchase order numbers, reference numbers to your orders, just to make sure you're kind of managing it internally. So from the renewable sector to the environmental sector, if you've got a particular project name and you want to track that, you can do that through the invoicing pages. So I think I have covered everything, just to make sure nobody else has put anything in. Oh, one last piece of data let's see if I can show you. That might not work here. So the last question I had actually was around licensing. So licensing is always a fun one to try and explain, but predominantly anything ordnance survey wise, master map that we've kind of talked about is on an annual, you're basically renting the data. It's probably a wrong way of explaining it, but in my head that kind of works best. You're not buying the data outright, you're buying it for the project for the 12-month period. Some projects are, you know, done and dusted very, very quickly. Some projects you could be working on for many years. So you would have to renew that kind of master map data on an annual basis. And very clean, simple process, sending you reminders and checking on that data. So we work with you on that. Some of the data is not kind of needing to be kind of renewed. So your Groundshaw report is a kind of one-off report and off you go. Utilities technically is not a renewable kind of product, but from the PAS 128 kind of compliance, if you are looking at that site for many years, you should kind of refresh and renew that data to make sure you are compliant. But predominantly from a licensing point of view, most kind of data sets are annually renewable products. Otherwise, it will stay in the platform if it's not, if it's a perpetual license. So hopefully that I've made myself clear. So I think I've covered all the questions. If there's any other questions, please come to me directly this afternoon. If not tomorrow, I will send a follow-up or my colleagues will come back to you directly. Many thanks for joining the webinar. I'd love to have your feedback. I want to make sure I've got the right blend of kind of product and functionality walkthroughs to make sure you're aware of, you know, how eMapSite can work for you. There's lots and lots of other data sets that we could talk through. There's lots and lots of other functionality I could talk through. So it'd be nice to get your feedback to make sure I've got that kind of blend right. Apart from that, happy Thursday, have a good day, and I look forward to working with you very soon. Bye for now.